Good morning. Today is Friday, March 18th, 2022. It's 8:31 a.m. and this is the morning session of Senate Natural Resources and Energy. Today we're resuming work on Bill H-175, an act relating to the beverage container redemption system, and continuing with the testimony that we started earlier this week. So our first guest this morning is Scott DeFife.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. We didn't get a chance to test the audio before, as long as you can hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, thanks.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Chairman Bray and members of the committee, my name is Scott DeFife. I'm president of the Glass Packaging Institute. We are the trade association representing North American. Oh, sorry.
Mr. DeFife, we're just having there you go. Get that microphone a little closer.
Okay, how's it? Is that better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. My name is Scott DeFife. I'm the president of the Glass Packaging Institute, which is the trade association representing the North American glass container manufacturing industry and our entire supply chain. We work with glass recyclers as well as all the raw material suppliers to provide glass containers in North America. We represent plants in Canada, the US, and Mexico. And we work with state and local governments to work on sustainability, recycling, packaging, and energy use policy. I'm pleased to be here today to talk with the committee about glass. I noticed in the previous version of the hearing that there were lots of questions about glass, and I'm going to try to save some time so that I can answer some of those questions. I think some of the information on the previous day may not be completely accurate with regard to end markets for recycled glass, and I'm happy to answer those. But the industry is here to tell you that we support any and all efforts to increase glass recovery and return that material to the glass manufacturing supply chain. And we are engaged in a series of ongoing efforts to increase the use of recycled glass in making new containers and doing as much as we can to help recover that glass. The reason for that is glass is a core circular packaging material which is reusable, refillable, and endlessly recyclable. As long as we can get it back, it can be recycled into new bottles and jars infinitely. Once you have made raw materials into glass the first time, it takes less energy to convert the recycled glass back into the molten glass to remake new jars. So for every additional ton of recycled glass, you're offsetting at least a ton, if not more, of raw materials from making new bottles, plus you're reducing the amount of energy that it takes to run the furnace to make the glass for the next batch, which reduces energy costs and emissions and saves on the carbon footprint. Our colleagues in Europe are generally enjoying a 70% glass recovery rate through most of their EPR programs. Many of those include deposit return programs, and their recycled content rates are upwards north of 50%. Those are goals that we would like to get to in North America, and programs such as the Vermont Deposit Container Law allow us to do that. It gets the glass back to its highest best use and allows us to make a variety of different containers. In the region, which includes plants in New York and Canada, and all of the bottle bill glass that's currently in the Vermont program ends up back in a furnace. If it is not used in a container furnace, it can end up in a fiberglass furnace. Fiberglass also needs recycled cullet, what we call cullet, which is the furnace ready, clean glass that's ready to go back into a furnace. That material must be free of contaminants, no metals, no ceramics, no Pyrex, no other things that mimic glass in the waste stream in terms of weight and constitution, because those can mess up the furnace. So you have to be very careful about what you put back in the furnace. It needs to be clean. We estimate that the 60%, nearly 60% of all the recycled glass that goes back into furnaces in the United States comes from the 10 bottle deposit states. This is because it is a large supply of clean source separated glass that's never been contaminated in the single stream waste program. A key issue that I didn't hear a lot about on the previous days of testimony with regard to the end markets is quality and contamination levels. Okay, you may recover glass from single stream and it may end up back into a bottle manufacturing plant, but the yield from the material going through single stream is going to be significantly lower than the yield from the bottle bill program. If you're a bottle and you want to become a bottle again, you want to be in a bottle deposit program. You have a 99 out of 100% chance of becoming a bottle again if you're in a container deposit program. Your chances of that happening if you are in a single stream curbside recycling program are significantly lower. And that varies very much due to the capability of the facility that that material is going to. There are single stream facilities that can do glass well and do provide cullet, but those are the exception rather than the rule. And I'm happy to answer questions about the differences and what allows that to happen. So we certainly enjoy glass from single stream. It provides a high volume of material in non-bottle bill states, but in the region in New England and the Northeast, there is so much bottle bill glass from the 5 container deposit states that most of the glass processing capacity is geared towards the cleaner streams. So if you have good high volume streams of clean bottle deposit glass and processing that can handle that bottle deposit glass, our recommendations are that you lean into that as much as possible when it makes sense to add material to the cleaner source separated streams. In my testimony, I included a couple pictures to differentiate what comes out of those are not pictures from Vermont, but these are typical pictures of single stream recycling. And I think what is not often discussed with a lot of policymakers is that the way that glass is treated in single stream, even if they're doing it relatively well, is it comes out at the end. And embedded in the glass pile, glass does not come out in bales, embedded in the glass pile is all the other small fractional materials, shredded paper, plastic caps, straws, anything else that got into the recycling stream or doesn't belong there, ends up in the glass pile. And often because of the hydraulic press in the truck and the shaking and everything else that goes on through the MRF, you're going to get small fraction of glass that you cannot visually identify as glass. This is a point I want to make to the committee because I saw a lot of references to the DSM report and some recycling rates for material that are similar in the curbside single stream to the container deposit system. We believe that that data it has some flaws in it, and it's overestimating the amount of glass that's coming back into the recycling system through the curbside single stream for a couple of different reasons. There was that one incident where there were thousands of tons of glass set aside at one MRF, and that was incorrectly calculated in the report. And in addition, a lot of the glass from visual inspection cannot be seen as glass because it ends up in the other pile as MRF residual. So it comes in, what comes in from a MRF, if it looks like trash in the one picture that I provided in my testimony, there's a lot of glass in that picture, but you can't necessarily tell that it's glass from visual inspection. It may look like sand, it may look like dirt because it's too small. Those fractions are glass, but you can't tell that they're glass, so they often get mischaracterized in waste characterization studies. Lastly, I also heard some discussion about aggregate use and the various environmental benefits of bottle recycling for container deposit and things of that nature versus aggregate use. We're not saying that glass cannot be used for aggregate. Certainly can, and it probably does have environmental benefits compared to regular concrete or regular material use or construction, of concrete and other aggregates, but not compared to the environmental benefits of returning that glass back into the glass container recycling and remanufacture industry, even the glass recovery hierarchy that the Northeast Recycling Coalition has put forth clearly identifies refill and recycle as above beneficial use into aggregate and roadbed. And I'll end there. I'm happy to answer your questions. I'll just finish up by saying any additional glass that you add to the container deposit program in Vermont will very likely make it back into a glass container manufacturing plant.
Thank you for your testimony. Any committee questions for Mr. Pike? Senator McCormick.
Thank you for your testimony. Can you hear me through the mask?
I can, yes, sir.
Okay. We've been talking here about recycling. Vermont law regarding waste has a legally prescribed pecking order of desirable outcomes, starting with reduce, which is, I think, is not on the table here. But then there is, before we get to recycling, there is reuse. And glass bottles are always the perfect example. People of a certain age remember where your mother put the empties out at the door and the milkman took them when he delivered the milk. And those bottles were reused. Also, I think beer was often done, reused bottle. It seems to me that that's the preferable way. Why is that not being done more?
Well, I mean, that is a big question that relates to some societal changes from decades ago that incentivize, that really reacted to a desire for mobile, disposable, packaging. Much of that started in the 70s and 80s as the soda companies were the first ones really to convert away from reusable, refillable glass to plastic. And that was a significant part of the glass manufacturing production sectors. And when those companies moved away for a more mobile, what they thought of as a more mobile, flexible, disposable, transportable package, they shifted from glass to plastic. I enjoy the milk refill at my front door still. A lot of the milk and dairy, especially the small dairies, use the refillable milk program, and there are substantial benefits for using refill, and glass is a great material for that. It's completely generally recognized as safe. You can put any food or beverage in the glass and not worry about the interactions or migration from the package to the material. It's resilient and can stand through that. It is largely a brand question as to why or when they want to do their packaging in a particular material. The glass industry can make any different size, shape, or bottle. The glass industry can make refillable bottles. We make refillable beer bottles for Canada. We make refillable beer bottles in Oregon. There are multiple programs being studied for refillable wine bottles. It can be done, and it's a good material for refill and rewash.
Thank you. That's all.
Sorry, when in your testimony, you said if you're a bottle and you'd like to be turned back into a bottle again, reincarnated as a bottle once more.
Yep.
That you'd rather participate in a bottle deposit system than a single stream system. And I thought you said that you had a 99% chance of being turned into a bottle again if you came out of a bottle deposit system. So that seems like such a high number. I mean, I haven't heard anyone say that before. Can you explain a little more? Seems like an extraordinarily successful rate of being turned into a bottle again.
Well, I'm not suggesting that 99% of all of the cullet comes back into container deposits, but the likelihood or the possibility of you getting back into a container plant is extraordinarily high. The glass manufacturing industry takes as much clean cullet as we can get our hands on. There is not piles of clean cullet waiting for customers. So all of the bottle bill material from the Northeast is finding a home in a furnace. Okay. Now there are furnaces, you know, in the fiberglass industry, right? And they need clean cullet as well. So that comment was not so much to say that 99% of all the cullet goes back to the container plants as saying you have a virtually 100%, you know, very close to 100% chance of being a bottle again if you're in a bottle deposit program, because you're going to be turned back in, you're going to be used in a furnace. We use all of the clean cullet in furnace applications, and most of that is the container manufacturing plant.
Thank you for that. Can you explain a little bit about the economics? I mean, we've heard for years that glass, particularly when it's single stream glass, is a cost to the MRFs and a, you know, challenge to dispose of. That's part of why 3 or 4 years running they've been looking for creating an agreement with the transportation agency to be able to spec it out and use it in roadbed construction, things like that. But it just seems as though it's still a cost to dispose of versus when you talk about colored glass and it has value. So can you help us understand whether it's actually profitable to handle bottle deposit system glass, because there is a market that lets you, it'll break even or even make a profit if you're the ones running the program?
Certainly. The primary issue with the market price of single stream MRF glass is the contamination. Okay, so when you process all the recyclable materials through a MRF, even a good MRF, okay, and the best ones may get you into single digit non-glass residual. Okay, so when we talk about non-glass residual, that's material that's not glass, right? But there's, in a MRF, there's another category of material. I talked about the small particles that end up in the waste characterization studies as other MRF, you know, MRF residual. A lot of that's glass because it's small fractional, you know, sand-like portion that you can't really tell is glass or whether it's dirt or sand or something like that. So when you add up the non-glass residual and we call those fines, okay, you could call them small fraction, you know, things of that nature. It's not the cullet size glass that's 3/8 of an inch or larger. All of that material is just weight in the system and isn't, you know, can't be marketed back. And so it's not necessarily the glass that doesn't have the value, it's the contamination coming along with the glass. If I order a ton, if I get a ton of single stream glass delivered to a processing facility, at best 25% of it's not usable, at worst 50% of it's not usable. The picture that I included in my testimony is a raw load of single stream glass that's being delivered to a cleaning facility. You're hard pressed to even see any glass in that, right? So if you have a ton of material that's supposed to be glass and you're paying to move it from point A to point B, and then only half of it's glass, or let's just say generously 35% of it's glass, then you have to clean all of that up. And then the glass processor has to take that residual remaining material, and then they have to landfill it. So the price reflects the transportation of the contamination and the non-usable material that comes from the single stream facility. And Mr. Chairman, that starts the minute they put it in the back of a truck and use a hydraulic press to smash it and integrate it with the other recyclables.
And what's the primary uses these days? I don't know if, you know, processed glass aggregate, you know, is there's a plant that's I think under construction, and we're not sure when it's going to come online. Are you familiar with Glavol?
I only heard about that earlier this week as I was reviewing some of the testimony before the committee. There are Pozzolan applications there's a Pozzolan plant in Connecticut that may be able to take some of the fines and use those for a concrete substitute, aggregate substitute. These things are coming online, foam glass aggregate, things of that nature, and they can be used for the fines and the residual glass that can't be cullet. so I am familiar with them. We don't have any issues with that percentage of the glass material going to those uses. It's better use than in landfill. But if you can keep it as cullet, you're going to get the highest best use out of the recycled glass.
Sure, sure. And are there issues with both single stream glass and bottle deposit glass? Are there any issues around cleaning it? Like the process, sometimes we end up say, well, just clean it, but in this committee, we know everything's connected. So how are they cleaning it? What's coming out? Does it contain things like chemicals of concern, heavy metals, etc.? I'm just wondering, if you look at the whole system, just pick on the glass piece, but I think we also want to make sure that we're not creating other problems to be addressed, by somebody else.
Certainly. There's no toxic chemicals in glass. There may be some very, very small element, oxides, mineral oxides used for coloring and things of that nature. All of the North American glass falls under the TPCH, which is the Toxics and Packaging Clearinghouse standards for metals and elements in the United States. There are occasionally concerns with material that might be brought in from China or for some other Asia that may not have as much regulation, but those materials are tested regularly. So the second part is if it is in the glass, it's not migrating out of the glass into the food or beverage product. It's inert. It's not migrating in and out of that. Lastly, I do not know of any chemicals of concern or anything that's used it's water, air, to clean the glass from single stream material. Certainly bottle bill material takes a very, very light wash and breakage, and then can go back into a furnace. So you just want to make sure that you're pulling out the metals and the ceramics. Usually there's an optical sorter, ceramics detection equipment that can pull that out of drop-off glass and things of that nature. You don't want a spare bottle cap to get in there. But the bottle bill material, since it has a really secure chain of custody, if you will, takes a very, very light processing to get it back into cullet-ready material for the manufacturer.
Thank you. Any committee questions for Mr. Kaufman? All right. Well, thanks for your testimony, and thanks for submitting it digitally as well, so it's posted on our website, so anyone watching can pull it up as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to invite Bree, let me make sure, hope I'm getting your last name right. Deeply, thanks. Welcome to Senate Natural Resources and Energy. You could just introduce yourself for the record. Love to hear what you have to say. Cool. Thank you.
And good morning. My name is Bree Deatley. I'm a principal at Breezeway Consulting in Somerville, Massachusetts. I am here today representing the Beverage Association of Vermont, which is the association of non-alcoholic beverages. So our members in Vermont include the Coca-Cola operation in Colchester, Rutland, and down in Greenfield, Massachusetts, that serves Vermont, as well as the Pepsi bottling facility in Burlington and the Leader Distribution Company down in Brattleboro, and Polar Beverages. So those are our members in the state. We have about 700 employees in Vermont. I'm also here wearing a second hat, and I am the general manager and oversee the commingling program in Vermont. So I manage them through a different sorting and allocation system, and I'm going to talk a lot about how the bottle bill actually works today in my discussion about H-175. I am not, to be clear, representing the commingling group here. We don't take political positions on issues. We're an LLC that is formed strictly to manage the returns, but it does give me a lot of insight into how the system works. I apologize, I was not able, because of clients and colleagues traveling and flying around, couldn't get the final version of the testimony to you digitally, but I will do that probably later today.
Okay, thank you.
So let me just say, at the outset, with regard to House Bill 175, we do not support the expansion of the law under House Bill 175 as it is written. That said, we do see a path to expanding the bottle bill, but we think there are some issues that have to be addressed first. And I hope by talking a little bit about how the system works and possibly you all getting out at some point and seeing a little more about how the system works, that will make more sense to you in terms of what those issues are. And really some of the issues we're facing now that we really feel we need to address first before we add more material and more containers to the system. Let me also say as a general rule in talking about our membership, that our companies have made a lot of commitments individually and as an industry to incorporating more recycled material into their bottles and cans. In fact, the industry and some other industries are now compelled by law in a number of states to incorporate recycled material into their bottles and cans. We have minimum recycled content standards now that we have to comply with in Washington State, in California, in New Jersey, and soon in Maine. So we are under both a commitment, a personal and individual corporate commitment, as well as legal commitments to get more material into our bottles and cans. That means we need more back. And the industry launched a campaign called Every Bottle Back in 2019 to try to do exactly that. And that involves direct investments that the companies are making in recycling systems around the country, but it also involves engagement in policies like this, where we realize that where in the past the industry has been an absolute no on expansion in many places, we are laying out here, and I want to talk about a path to expansion in Vermont that we think is a reasonable way to go, that will in fact get us more of our material back, which is our ultimate objective here.
I have a quick question on the recycled content.
Yes.
Is that for all the different materials? So is there an aluminum version and a plastic version and a glass version?
It's of course all over the map because it's being done on a state-by-state basis. In most states, the 4 states that do or will soon have laws, all of them do include plastic beverage containers, PET beverage containers. But in California, for example, it only includes the PET beverage containers which are subject to the deposit law in California. There are some that are exempt, so it's outside of that. So I have a chart someplace that kind of tries to compare, but for example, to Mr. DeFife's issues, only New Jersey addresses glass, and none of them address aluminum. So it's very selective in terms of what's affected.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Of course.
Thank you. This is great. I still am one of those folks, and maybe this needs to be on my own over the weekend, is to really sort of understand like how things are working right now. And how we're some of the proposals going forward. It's one of these interesting things that you start to talk about this thing and you think, you really understand the ins and outs of it. But the complexities really do exist, and so anyhow,
I'm gonna do my best to start to pull back the curtain on that.
Okay.
And so I'm happy we can extend that conversation as needed.
and as I said to you in the hall, I know the chair, some of us structure, maybe part of it is just going and watching some of this stuff and really understanding it. Yeah.
So when the law started, if you go way back to the 1970s, 1980s, when the law started, not that I was around or anything like that, but
I was.
the program was set up to be based on each distributor. So each distributor was responsible for getting its own bottles and cans back from the stores and the redemption centers. So in those days, pretty simple system. The Pepsi bottler and then took the bottles out to the store, brought them back. The industry was changing at that point. We were shifting over from refillable bottles to cans. Cans were coming in, plastic was coming in, glass was shifting to one-way glass instead of refillable glass. And what was happening in the stores was different. They weren't bringing in wooden crates with refillables anymore. They were bringing in new types of bottles and packages that consumers were taking off the shelves as they left the refillables behind, because they didn't want to deal with carrying the refillables around. So as that system evolved and we got a deposit in Vermont, each distributor was going out to each location. So Farrell was going to all their accounts, and Baker was going to all their accounts, and Calmont was going to all their accounts, and Pepsi and Coke and all the other distributors were going to their accounts. Well, since, and the beverage aisles in the stores have gotten huge. There's way more brands, there's way more companies, way more people involved. Having all those people going out to all those stores gets really complicated. And what happened and what we saw in the 2000s here, initially the handling fee was increased here in 1988 to 3 cents to accommodate some of the extra work and sorting that the redemption centers were doing. Vermont had the highest handling fee in the country for many years after that increase in 1988. But in the mid 2000s, the redemption centers were complaining again about the amount of work that they had to do and what they were being paid. And so there was a group that got together, A&R, the distributors, the retailers, the redemption centers got together, worked on a compromise, and the commingling system resulted from that. 2008, the statute was changed, and there was an agreement to allow for another increase in the handling fee, which went to 3.5 for commingling and 4 cents if you weren't in commingling. And what commingling was a system that was devised by the distributors, actually a fellow from Farrell and a fellow from Pepsi, and from Skip Farrell's operation in Burlington, Pepsi, kind of came up with this idea of, well, we're going to take all of our products together. So right now we have Farrell, Baker, Calmont, the Craft Beer Guild, Coke, and Pepsi statewide. And all of us allow the redemption centers to put all of our containers together. So if I have a 12-ounce can of Bud, a 12-ounce can of Pepsi, or a 12-ounce can of some craft beer that the guild carries, all those go in the same 12-ounce can bag at the redemption center. We require 13 sorts. There's 4 can bags, different sizes. There's 3 glass sorts for color, and there's 3 PET sorts for single serve, 1 liter and 2 liter. All of our containers go in those 13 sorts. We do 87% of the returns in Vermont. 87% of the returns in 2000, which is the last year I have the data for, went through the commingling system. My numbers report to me what their sales are each month. I report percentage allocations to Tomra. Tomra does the pickup for all of the commingled accounts. So all they do is take all the 12-ounce commingled bags that there are. Here's how many 12-ounce cans there were. And I tell them what percentage gets billed to Coke, to Pepsi, to Farrell, to Baker, to Calmont, and Craft Beer Guild. Pretty simple. For the redemption centers, that's 13 sorts for 87% of what they have.
So I can go on a website and find out where the redemption centers. But I have, at least in my town, the only place that will take bottles in my town is a store, a mom and pop store.
Yeah.
It's not a redemption center. So,
Okay.
and he's technically not a redemption center, not on the map in how would I be able to see? Because if I do your history, when this all started, I could take my bottles back to everybody. And now I only know of one place between Morrisville and Essex that I can take bottles back to.
Well, Tomlinson's takes it back, don't they?
In Morrisville,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, they're one of the biggest redemption centers
Yeah,
in the
but-
state, actually.
Right, they're a redemption center in Morrisville.
Yeah.
And there's a redemption center in Essex Center.
Yeah.
And the only place between there on Route 15 I know of that I can take a bottle back is the Cambridge Village Market.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a 40-mile stretch with, and I'm just worried that if we aren't careful, if he goes out, people in my town are not going to carry their a bag of bottles 20 miles.
Sure. So, 3/4 of the redemption centers that are in the commingling system
Yep.
are stores. They're retailers of some sort. Only a quarter of them are standalone redemption centers that do nothing but redemption.
Yep.
But by law, every single retailer that sells a beverage in Vermont has to take it back. Now, I challenge you to go to any dollar store in Vermont and try to get your nickel back because they won't take it. Now, that's a compliance problem. That's not a problem with law. But we do most of our business with the 80-some redemption centers that are in the commingling
If you
system.
go to the Maple Fields, they're not going to take your bottles back.
They might take them back. They'll handle a few. Most people don't go there because it's not as convenient. The places that are more used to it are faster. They can get you in and out, et cetera, like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's
I
fine.
just,
But
you know, it's hard for me to see where to take bottles back now.
Well, the number of places where it has shrunk somewhat, but a lot of that is because stores have simply stopped accepting them, not because they're allowed to stop accepting them, they have just simply stopped accepting. So all retailers are by law still required to take back an empty if they sell them.
Okay.
So that may be a DEC question more than a.
Okay, well,
Question,
Yeah.
take it from 3 in the morning to 5 in the morning.
So, yeah, Senator, following up on Senator Westman's point, question is really, so some are supposed to, in fact, required by law to, but they're just saying no.
Right.
And so that, I didn't even realize that that might be happening. And so, yeah, it would be curious, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, to find out from DC, what are the repercussions if you say no, you know?
Well, I'm trying to, so obviously, we need to learn more, and I'm just trying to recall, there is a provision that says, if you're within X miles, 5 miles of a redemption center, then the store is not obligated to accept bottles back.
What do you mean if you are within 5, who's within 5 miles?
If the store, if I'm operating my mom and pop store.
Yeah.
and say, I don't want to do this.
Okay. Oh, I see.
If
If that mom and pop store is within 5 miles.
And then,
Yeah.
then they're allowed to say, we're out, but they
Yeah,
can't.
that's not, yeah.
So the concept was that you would never let someone out of the obligation if it wasn't reasonably close to another redemption center.
it just said, how many towns is there in Orange County?
How many, what?
Towns are there in Orange County?
I got 11 in my Senate district.
Well, there's 3 redemption sites listed in Orange County. So I don't see people carrying bags of bottles. just-
Well, we should be asking ourselves why we don't see that. And the witness started out with
I'm
where
yeah.
this began, but
Yep.
he didn't start out with where it began.
Mhm.
Because bottles used to sell beer and soda bottles for, nickel or a dime. And when you brought them back, you got 2 cents. This was what the industry did for years. You got your bottles back, and the industry said, why are we taking these bottles back? It's trucks, it's people, it's payroll. How do we get out of this? So they started to print no deposit, no return,
Mhm.
and told you how wonderful it was. And then they all, now editorializing, got in the back room and slapped each other on the back and said, we got the public and the taxpayer to pay for this stuff. And now we don't have to do any of that. That's what they did.
Okay.
And then we came up with well, because why should, let the taxpayer pay for this stuff?
Mhm.
Get it off our books. So then we came up with a bottle deposit of a nickel. And the nickel kind of went back to the notion that people would return their bottles and they'd get a nickel. Here we are, 40, 50 years later, a nickel is now worth anywhere from 27 cents to 42 cents, depending on who you listen to.
Mhm.
And the industry comes in here and they go, don't change the nickel. That's what they've said. They've told us not to change the nickel, which means they can now, at Maple Fields, you come in to get, oh, sorry, the boy that does this is called in sick. Sorry, no bottles today. Or the truck broke down, no bottles today. They want to unload this onto the consumer and the taxpayers. That's what they want to do. And every time we keep it at a nickel, they're unloading it onto us. And that's what's going on. And it's up to us to say, we're going to put it back on you.
So with all due respect, Senator, we want it back. We want it back on us. We need those bottles back. By law, we need those bottles back. We want it back. What I want to articulate today is that commingling system that I talked about, that gave this system life for the last 15 years, the system would have collapsed without the commingling system. What we have right now is about 15% of the returns that are coming back through that same very spread out distributor sorted system. We asked the redemption centers in this state to sort 750 brands of beverage containers across about 150 different distributors. Now, our distributors are covered by that one system. But if you go into the redemption centers, most of them, the larger ones especially, they've got 100 to 150 bins out there that they're throwing stuff into. We account for 13 of those. The other 13% of the containers account for that 100 and some other bins out there. If you expand the lot tomorrow, you're gonna add about 40% more containers to the system. Over half of those are new brands. The redemption centers would have to do 300 to 400 sorts, 300 to 400 bins in the back. Go to Maine, that's exactly what you see.
Okay.
That system would blow up if we took the redemption system to expansion today, which is why we think that we have to do like we did with commingling. We need to reform the system again. We need to take over more of the system so it can function like the commingling system does. We're gonna need some technology, some innovation, some scale, some investment. To do that, set a system up so that everything can be sorted as simply as the commingled brands are sorted. And then let's expand the lot. And we are willing to agree to a timeline to do that. But we are afraid of the implications for us, for the redemption centers and for the retailers of doing expansion before we tee up that system. And I've laid out in my testimony, and we'll talk quickly about sort of the pieces of what would have to happen in order for us to set that system up and to sort of do commingling 2, if you will.
Senator King?
So Ms. Deeply, right, is it Deeply?
It is the,
Okay, so right now, you're saying in Maine, there are hundreds of these bins so that folks, what does it look like right now in the back rooms, if you will, of Vermont when these things are being?
so most of the redemption centers have cardboard or metal or wood bins. You stand up like this, that you put a bag inside of.
Yeah,
They're just, it's something to make the bag stand up.
yeah,
And they throw the different bottles, cans into those bags.
okay,
The glass goes into a large plastic thing that holds hundreds and hundreds of bottles that
Yeah.
get moved with hydraulics. But the bottles and cans go into these stand-up bins. When the bin reaches a certain level, they shake it, they pull the bag up, they tie it off, and they throw it in the back.
okay,
And they keep them in piles. The commingled brands all go in the big pile. And the distributor sorted brands, the hundreds of other brands.
okay, yeah,
They go like this.
even here in Vermont,
And that's how it works here.
And there's 13 bags.
When there's 13 different, well, there's 10 different kinds of bags for our guys' stuff.
okay,
And there's 3 bins of glass for our guys' stuff.
Okay,
Then there's hundreds of other bags for the other distributors that are sorted by the distributor. So when the Hummer driver comes to do the pickups, he looks at our stuff and he says, 12-ounce bags, 250 for commingling. And then he gets his handheld out and he goes, okay, there's Cumberland Farms, one of those. There's Walmart, 2 of those. There's Target, 1 of those. And he's there for like, an hour coding out the rest of those distributor brands and sorts. And there's only a bag or 2 of most of those. So we're spending an enormous amount of money on a very small amount of material. And expansion is going to make that worse. Go down the juice aisle and look at how many brands of juices and teas that there are. Boom. The industry has completely changed. It is a different business than it was in those days. It's not just the Coke driver coming in and bringing in his brands. And so all we're going to do is add to that. Oh man, all those sorts. We don't have a redemption center in Vermont that could accommodate that much space. And we've had working groups with A&R and the redemption centers and the stores and our guys for 3 years that the DEC has facilitated. And we've talked through these ideas. And a lot of the redemption centers acknowledge they couldn't accommodate the extra volume. And they like commingling. So we have to marry those systems up to keep the system going, to keep it healthy, and to be able to accommodate the extra material, because frankly, we want the additional PET plastic coming back that we would get from expansion. But we have to have a system that can handle it. That's what we're about.
Let's see, so the bill proposes, actually, we had a bill like this 3 years ago, it got derailed by COVID, to increase the differential between commingled.
Yes.
and non-commingled. So now
Yeah, and we're supportive of that.
3.5, 5.
Yep, we have
How
been
much-
supportive of that.
How effective do you think that will be to getting the 100 other sorts or whatever to say, now this is starting to add up to real money, let's work together and create a new commingling tool.
It's a bit of a Band-Aid. It's treating a symptom and not a problem. And what we really need is a structural solution. The structural solution that the commingling group provides, that I provide, is an analytic tool that allows for the sorting to happen on paper. I do the sorting on paper because I know what each of our member companies sell in Vermont, because they all have franchises to sell in Vermont. Coke is the only one that can sell Coke in Vermont. The two Pepsi bottlers are the only ones that can sell Pepsi in their franchises. And the same is true for the beer wholesalers who have franchises. When we get beyond franchise soft drink companies to companies who are selling in stores, national brands, Ocean Spray, there are no franchise agreements. Those products can come into the state through 20 different distributors all at the same time. And there's no way of knowing how much of that was sold in the state. So I can't do my on-paper sorting anymore if we get those brands in the system. It doesn't work. So what we need to do somehow is take those additional brands and come up with a different way of sorting them. And that probably means taking them all in together and then sending them to a central sorting facility where you singulate the containers and you have them read with a barcode reader, and use a technology like Tomra or Anchor Anderson, or a lot of companies have, to be able to scan and sort those containers that way. Now that costs more, but it's a lot better than having 300 bins in the back of your redemption center and trying to handle it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. My little mom and pop store has a space half the size of this room.
Absolutely.
And if I cut 300 bins, they're going out of business.
They don't have the space. And so what they'll do is they'll combine things together. And then they'll have to be sorted somewhere else. So that'll go to Thomas.
Or they'll just plain give up.
Well, they may give out too. Yeah.
They going out for this reason?
Senator,
Are they going out of business, mom and pop,
Mr.
for
Chair.
this reason?
so Senator Campion? Senator Weissman, anything?
Oh,
No,
sorry.
that's fine. It's,
Okay. So what is the industry, so it sounds, and maybe this isn't exactly, what I'm trying to understand is, has the industry been trying to work with folks to get people caught up on this kind of thing? I mean, has the industry been making investments to get to where we might, that's what I'm wondering,
Okay. Yeah.
what is the industry doing?
So we have invested in commingling. The commingling doesn't just happen. Commingling, there's an investment that's reflected in commingling. I'm an investment in commingling. They have to pay me to do what I do. They have to pay Tomra to do the sorting and the work that they do. We've been engaged in the working groups with ANR over the years to kind of jawbone the need to sort of go to a new system. Expansion is inevitable.
Yeah.
What we need is sort of a green light to move ahead. What we're doing in Connecticut right now, for example, is, and it's what we propose to do here, we would like to form a nonprofit stewardship organization, a nonprofit beverage container stewardship organization that would be responsible for all the empties in Vermont. And it would be just like your other stewardship programs that you have for electronics or, that you do for any other programs. We would take that group, compel everyone to be part of it. So those cat and dog brands from all over, who knows where, would all have to be part of that, would report information to that organization. That organization would then make the investments that are needed to set up a new sorting, a new technology, invest in whatever that technology would be. And we would do a plan, a stewardship plan, just like is done with the other EPR programs. We do a stewardship program for how we were going to handle the containers. We'd agree to a schedule for expansion. We'd agree to keep the redemption rate at least 80%. We'd be a nonprofit organization like commingling is. We just want to wash the money through, make it pay for what it needs to pay for. But unless we have everybody in the boat, we can't do it. Like, we could grow commingling a little bit by adding some additional brands to it. But once we expand, we can't get all those guys in because they can't, as I said, they can't play on the same field that we play on because they don't have the sales data to be able to report accurately on what they have in Vermont. So we're going to have to look at those containers a different way and sort them a different way. And unless they're compelled to be part of that system, they'll be free riders and they won't. Just like with any EPR program, you have to compel participation in the system. That's the way That's the way the Oregon system has been reformed in the US. It's the way all the Canadian deposit systems run. It's the way all the European systems run. It's the new ones that are being set up in Europe are being set up that way. We're just a little behind in the Northeast, especially in terms of how we govern our redemption systems.
So if, for all the franchise produced beverages in Vermont, you could have accurate data. I mean, there could be, in a way you could say, there was an automated system that was sorting on barcodes.
That's
It
what
would
we
be
have.
one bin, right? Because in essence, that you could do all the sorting and you would have the sales data to match up who's material. You know whose bottles can't, whatever they were.
We do want sorting by, at least, we have to keep the materials separate for value. And keeping the sizes separate makes the counting a lot simpler, because some brands sell a lot in large bottles, some sell a lot small. So that helps us. But again, that's a very minimal number of sorts compared to the whole system.
But for all the material for all the beverages that come from non-franchisees, you won't know where they're coming from.
That's
So
right.
There's no bill back.
The only way we can bill them back is to either sort them all by distributor, which is how they do it today. So if there is a Sam's Choice can of soda, that Sam's Choice gets all put in one bag. If you're a redemption center where there isn't a Walmart real close by, it might take you 3 months to fill that bag up. So that's taking up space. You throw it over there, eventually the Honda driver takes that away. But once you start adding all these other juice brands and stuff like that, you have a bunch of stuff like that, super low volume. And what, the smarter thing to do then would be to put all of those cat and dog 12-ounce fat cans into one bag, take them to a facility and sort them and read them after they come back. Because that's the only way you're gonna know what you got, is to look at what you've actually handled coming back. Because you can't use sales data the way we can use sales data on the coming link side now. That's our frustration. We gotta figure out how to charge people the right amount of money.
Okay, and how about stuff that's, ocean spray? How is that getting into Vermont?
So
How would you ever know how to do the bill?
the only way you would do that is to actually scan the PET bottles that are coming back and say, this is how many Ocean Spray bottles came back. Because if we asked Ocean Spray right now, what do you sell in Vermont? They would honestly say, I have no idea. Because Ocean Spray sells from a factory to a Walmart warehouse, maybe even to Bentonville, Arkansas for a Walmart. Walmart does all the distribution of that product. Target does the distribution of their product. Shaw's does the distribution of their product. Stop and Shop does the distribution. Hannaford, they all do their own distribution. Ocean Spray doesn't know where those bottles go. There isn't an RFID tag on those bottles that they can know that it was sold in Colchester. They just know they sold it to Walmart. If they went to Kentucky or they went to Vermont, they have no way of knowing that. And that's not their problem. They're a manufacturer. They're not a distributor. And the people in commingling are distributors. They're in Vermont. They're Vermont companies who do that. But here we have Associated Grocers and we have guys who do the convenience store supply. They're buying from brokers. It's coming all different ways. The only way we'll know what's there is to actually count what's there at the end. That's our only hope. Which is why we probably need two systems essentially. Senator McDonald.
Or to change and collect the amount of money necessary to process it when it leaves the factory, before it gets to Walmart, before it gets to all the other places, and then be able to take it to the landfill and put it in a container for free.
Well, if that was a national policy, Senator, absolutely.
Well, but
Yes.
the fact that it isn't a national policy gives the bottlers the ability to come in and argue for us to do short-sighted, stupid things that annoy people
Well, I think we've agreed that
to their advantage.
people like the deposit system, right? I mean, I think we've heard
Oh,
that.
but
We
problems-
we want to build on that and make it work for the new products.
Well, if the challenges that you've mentioned would be solved if you collected the money when it went out before it went to the Walmarts. If people like the deposits, then the solution to that one is raise the damn deposits to have people return more, so much of the work is done ahead of time. We used to joke about how if you have 36 bottles in the back of your pickup truck downtown, and someone walks by and throws a couple bottles into your truck, 10 cents worth, the system isn't working. If someone comes and no one's looking and they steal all the bottles out of the back of your truck, you've got a system that works. That's the measure. And we don't have a system that drives efficiency, except the example you gave, when people say, well, why should each individual truck take back each individual person's bottles? We'll commingle them. Right? Big, good move.
Yeah.
But we haven't had a similar move in years because it's still a damn nickel. You're
Well,
still unloading it on the.
Vermont does have the second highest redemption rate of any deposit state in the country.
Yes. With a
So, you've been,
in a bad system.
Recycling brings the best in the,
Been doing it for years. So
we've asked plenty of questions, on what have, I just want to make sure that we need to wrap up and keep going, but I want to make sure that for things that you wanted to share with us, that we may provide enough time for you to get that to us. So
Sure.
you have more
I
testimony? you'd
appreciate
like to
that. All I want to, I'll just wrap up and just say again that, we're concerned that H-175 as is would overburden the system. That's not to say that we don't think expansion is a good idea. In fact, our companies, and we, work jointly with beer industry on this, we jointly support this stewardship idea of building out a program that would allow for the expansion to the non-alcoholic, the rest of the non-alcoholic portfolio, and do that on the back of a nonprofit product stewardship organization, the way it's done in most of the rest of the world. If we don't meet our targets, if we don't get to the percentage that we need to get back through investments and promotion, then we talk about a higher deposit, because ultimately we need to be held to a standard, a percentage redemption rate standard. And if it doesn't necessarily take 10 cents to get there. Last year, Vermont had a higher redemption rate than Oregon did, and Oregon's 10 cents and we're 5. It has to do with people, population, the program, how it's designed. It isn't necessarily just the deposit value that makes a great program. Michigan's rate is lower than Vermont's, and Michigan's had 10 cents since it started. So 10 cents is a common metric in a lot of places. In Europe, it's 25 euro cents in Germany right now. It depends on the system. So we need to have a system that customers and consumers find friendly, helpful. That isn't necessarily some of the kinds of systems we've traditionally had. So we want to have a fighting chance to take on the new products and have a system that would allow us to do that, and are happy to sit down. We talked to ANR a lot about this issue. We are happy to sit down and craft legislation that would enable that to happen. And, you guys come up with the guardrails, tell us what we need to achieve, and we'll figure out how to get there.
Ms. Deasley, did you provide testimony in the House about the estimated number of swords that will result from the bill?
Yes. Yeah, I talked about a lot of these same issues in the House last, I virtually talked about these same issues in the House last, yes.
Well, great. Thank you for helping us. I think all of us are actually interested in getting out and seeing these systems in action. I mean, I think we've all seen it some because redeeming things, but yeah, we haven't seen the larger machinery that actually makes, once you're past the dropping things off at the window.
Yeah, it would be great to sort of follow, somebody, watch people come into a redemption center, drop their stuff off, watch how they sort it, and then be there when the Tomer driver comes, and watch how the Tomer driver is processing that material, loading it into the truck, and what's involved in that process too. Because that's, you watch the driver take care of 87% of the stuff in about 20 minutes, even though it's a lot of volume. And then they sort of hassle over the rest of the stuff. And it's very, kind of obvious how that all works. And then it gets to the top facility, all those, off a big machine get failed. But yeah, it is an interesting system behind the wall.
Final question, there must be something out there, like a YouTube video that also could sort of show us a little bit, I don't know if you have something, this is how they, something good. If you think of anything, would you email it to us?
Sure.
I mean, like how a bill becomes a law?
No, I know that.
Follow Bill Rock?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I don't-
Or just process, and something like
I
that.
understand. Yeah. I will think about that. I don't know of anything on that one.
Okay.
Could be a Mr. Rogers episode. He used to go off and follow all sorts of things through.
There might be some promotional videos from the,
I can Google it.
from the co-op in Oregon. If you look at the Oregon Beverage, the Redemption Corp co-op in Oregon, they might have some promotion work that just explains how they do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not kidding about Mr. Rogers. He used to do this. He'd go to follow an industrial process all the way through. All right, so, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for your time. I very much
Thank you.
appreciate it.
I suspect we might have more questions down the road.
I would like to go to someplace and see what the sorting looks like.
So where in Vermont would you suggest we go?
Well, if you're,
I mean, we're leaving here,
yeah,
right? I mean, that's.
Right.
I mean, if you were leaving here, you could, Bob Harrington's, place over in Barry. He does a very high redemption volume and does an incredible job sorting. He and his son Casey, run that facility and,
Over in Barry, you
Beverage
said?
Fair, it's Beverage Fair.
Oh, sure, yeah, we could go over there.
Yeah,
And I suppose if we knew when the Tommer truck was coming, we could see both.
Can you help us
I
set that up?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we can
thanks.
coordinate that.
Yeah,
I talked to most of the material, the stuff around here goes up to Essex, so the guys, who runs the Essex facility, you know, he and I work together all the time. I come up and do audits, spot audits of the redemption centers, and so we can definitely set something like that up.
Great. And are you suggesting that it would be good to see both the redemption center and the Tomra short facility?
That's up to you. I mean, that's up in
Where is that?
Essex. It's in Essex. It's a bit of a haul.
Yeah.
And that's mostly that you basically see them dumping bags out on the conveyor belts and then that's going up the belt and you can't see where it goes.
We might send the chair there, but I think the committee will continue to meet.
I'll bring a movie camera.
Bring a cell phone. Okay.
All right.
Well, I do appreciate
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right.
Mr. Chairman, before we go further, are we on the floor at 10 or 10:30?
10.
At 10?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
in terms of the interest of time, we have two energy bills on the floor, one for third reading, that the Energy Committee has never given scrutiny to. And you and I had discussed that this morning you would take some time to apprise us of this. But the other thing to actually do the issue justice is we could move that those bills be passed over this morning, which would give this committee time. They're on the calendar, so they've made crossover, and we could do our due diligence next week. And this is not simply a matter of being nitpicky about proper process. And as everyone in this committee certainly knows, the whole issue there of renewables and energy funding and so on is more complex than recycling and more controversial. And I often get angry or stressed emails from people where I don't know enough about the issue, and I'm supposed to be a bit of an expert on it, but I don't know enough about the issue to know if they're right or wrong. There are people with solar power and selling power back to the utility who say, if this or that passes, you're gonna ruin me financially, and you're taking away the real. And I don't know if they're right or wrong. I really think we need to do our due diligence, and so I would like to not make a go down fighting speech on the floor of the Senate and then vote no. But I certainly am not prepared to vote for any energy bill that this committee hasn't even looked at. So I would like to know what the chair's plans are.
sure. So if you look at the whiteboard, you'll see it says finance energy bills. You know, Friday discussion includes finance energy bills. But what we've ended up doing is spending more time than I originally anticipated talking about the model bill. So I think what I'd like to do is take our last half hour, split it into, we'll save, reserve 10 minutes at the end for talking about those bills before we go to the floor. And we can take a position as a committee. One thing, so there's an awkward jurisdictional question because they were referred to finance. And
Well, we could have asked for
this
it.
happens, what's that?
We should have asked for it.
Well, we could have asked for it, but by default, we're a single single committee system. So you have to ask for the referral. And I did in part because Senator McDowell and I are both on that committee. So that's just the way it unfolded. I broached this topic of how often we end up with this kind of a issue with two committees that have a shared interest. I don't think our Senate rules are clear enough. And 3 years running, I've tried to change them to make it a brighter line.
But when the rules do not speak, there is still custom. And it has always been that energy, the utilities are regulated by finance because they're utilities. But energy is regulated by natural resources and energy. And we regulate the energy aspects of energy utilities, and finance regulates the utility aspect. So they're interested in providing adequate service at a reasonable price within the confines of business law. That's their mandate. Our job is clean energy, appropriate energy, adequate energy.
They also regulate the PUC and the departments. And so when programs are run wholly through the department and the PUC, then I think that's part of why programs and bills end up referred to finance. To me, the crucial distinction is, are you setting new policy or are you just doing oversight? And I think that's where there's a lack of clarity in the way bills are referred. It ends up sometimes troubling. So let's.
Would that make, Senator McCormick, are you comfortable with that we do it today? And
You can decide if you're satisfied after we have the discussion.
Yeah, I do.
All right, with that, so I'm going to ask Mr. Montgomery to join us, and we'll hear more on the bottle bill. So thank you, Mr. Montgomery. If you can visit with us for about 10 minutes or so, or whatever. I don't know if that's longer than you anticipated or shorter. But we'd love to hear your perspective on the proposals that are in H175.
Great. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Good morning, Chairman Bray, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. For the record, my name is Bob Montgomery. I'm on the management team here at Hill Farmstead Brewery and Grassroots Distribution in Greensboro Bend. I have been with the company almost 10 years, involved in all aspects of the business, including the topic of today's hearing. Speaking primarily for our brewery and our wholesale distribution company, but also at the behest of the Vermont Brewers Association, as I'm a member of the Government Affairs Committee. The VBA is a nonprofit organization founded in 1995 to promote and strengthen the culture of craft brewing in Vermont. Over the last few years, I've participated as a stakeholder in various bottle bill discussions with the Agency of Natural Resources. Given our unique position as manufacturers, distributors, and retailers of our own products, as well as those of other companies, we have a fairly broad perspective on the system as it relates to beer. My previous testimony to the House in February of 2021 remains largely unchanged, and nor does the position of the VBA. The VBA takes no official position on the bill, and while our membership is a significant economic driver in Vermont, its contribution to the container load in Vermont is ultimately pretty minuscule as compared to other beverage segments. As a brewery, in general terms, we support dramatic change and improvement in the system, and agree with the excellent analysis provided by Bree Deatley, whom I've worked with over the years as well. Now that we're able to do so safely here, we are efforting to move our fresh product offerings for customers back to refillable containers, often referred to as growlers, as much as we're able to in the coming years, especially due to the challenges presented by aluminum use. This version of H175 has a relatively narrow scope, and in spirit, neither we nor the association opposes the inclusion of more recyclable products into the stream and the effort to remove them from the waste system. Raising the commingling penalty is unlikely to impact small producers like us, nor is it likely to sway us towards joining commingling. until such time that additional and or simplified commingling options are available. We participated in the commingling process that is organized by Breed Eatly for a short period of time and found that it was inequitable and not particularly transparent for a brewery of our size, where the majority of our product is sold directly and to a large number of out-of-state consumers. The accounting was very tricky, and the cost was much more onerous to us than simply having an agreement with TAMRA. But we recognize that the stance with especially the redemption centers and the challenges of having to do those hundreds of sorts is incredibly problematic. So once again, we agree with Breed Eatly that there needs to be a fairly systematic overhaul of the bottle bill and redemption center eventually. But in terms of this bill, we don't oppose it, and nor does the association. That's about it. Thank you, committee members, for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak during your hearing.
Okay. Thank you very much for the testimony. Any committee questions for Mr. Montgomery? All right. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to go to Mr. Blair. Good morning, Mr. Blair.
Good morning. Just to clarify, I'm a little bit confused about the conversation you were having regarding the timing. How much time do I have to testify? I am more than willing to change my time to accommodate your schedule with the floor hearing that you have to be at 10.
Well, I was going to ask you if we could reschedule you. That way, neither you nor us will shortchange the opportunity to have a good in-depth conversation. So,
absolutely.
We will, so thank you for your accommodating us, and I'll ask our committee assistant, Judith Newman, to reach back out to you. Obviously, we'll be working on this bill many more days, and we'll schedule it when we next pick it back up. So thank you for that offer.
Of course, and thank you for being accommodating to my time. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, so for anyone who's watching, and Mr. Hype, who I think may still be on, we're going to conclude the discussion of H175 right now and have a discussion about the energy bills that are in finance. Or one is on the floor, the second one is about. Thank you, Mr. Hype. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, yeah, the two bills, one was Senator Brock reported yesterday, third reading today, that extends a pilot that actually came out of finance. I don't know how many years ago. Senator McDonald, can you help me remember when it first came?
I think four. Yeah, I was on the committee.
All right, okay, great. So you know about it. Okay, so that pilot, because of COVID, it got, things got derailed. The pilot allows 9 firms that have large energy bills, electrical bills, and so large energy efficiency charge obligations to, instead of remitting the money, well, actually they still remit the money, I believe, to Efficiency Vermont Federal, or it goes to the utility. I don't know if who does the collecting. The point is, their obligation that they would have had to just contribute to Efficiency Vermont, they're allowed to propose projects that have to be reviewed by the Department of PUC and approved. And those projects are designed to reduce energy use, and they could be things. So their argument is, we've replaced all the light bulbs. Now our big bills related to running a very expensive, energy-intensive manufacturing line or something like that. Can we make changes to that manufacturing? Can we invest in more energy-efficient equipment on the line and not remit the dollars to Efficiency Vermont and do their sort of standard Efficiency Vermont-like things, which is usually HVAC, light bulbs, heating systems, etc. And so it's a pilot. In essence, the bill said, yes, you can do that. Now that comes along COVID, everyone loses some time in making changes. And they said, we would like to push out the deadline for operating the pilot. There was some difference of opinion about what should happen as that deadline is pushed out. Should they only collect money for the original 3 years and then just have extra time to implement? Or could we push out the deadline, let them collect even more money and run a larger pilot that ends on this a date that's also been moved out? So it's still a pilot program. Really, this is a date adjustment and the eligibility to do it for 18 months longer than the original anticipated.
Doing it 18 months longer, the consequence of that is,
They won't, for 18 months, they had the pilot not worked or et cetera, they would have flipped back to just sending their money to efficiency, or actually, they might have had their own energy savings program, but they would have had this pilot, which is even more flexible in how you can spend your money. And it could be that the savings come in the form of reducing fossil fuel use. It doesn't have to be electrical savings anymore. It's energy savings, but not purely electrical savings. So the big difference is the standard program reduces demand on the whole system and delivers a system-wide benefit to every ratepayer. Here, you could be reducing your fossil fuel use and your company's going to get the benefit. You'll have no positive contribution to all the other ratepayers in the form of helping reduce load on the system. So it is like a cross subsidy. In some cases, there are 9 participants. Every single plant is different. The reason that I ended up speaking in favor of it in committee was because we're moving away from just looking at saving kilowatt hours and saying, how do we take energy programs to focus on greenhouse gas reduction? Because that is the physical driver of climate change. And so the pilot will, in some cases, be more oriented. It can save the company money. Its community contribution becomes greenhouse gas reduction, not reduce kilowatt hours.
So there,
so man, I want
Yeah.
to
And I have
a opposing view that I'd like to share. First, the pilot that was put in place a couple years ago wasn't started on schedule. And I agree perfectly with saying the last 18 months, the last time, grant them the extra time to do what we authorized them to do a couple years ago. No problem with that. The bill also says that they get to collect 18 months more money, and that wasn't part of the original deal. The goal that we all have is to move away from using fossil fuel. But this takes electrical efficiency money away from all of us who pay for electricity efficiency money and all of us who benefit when electric efficiency is achieved. That's the program we have. It's self-contained, and this allows some people to take the money out to move away from fossil fuels, which is part of our goal. We need to move away from fossil fuels, and we're not doing it. We are not moving away from fossil fuels, and we have no program to move away from fossil fuels. This takes electric money to do a pilot program. We've asked the companies, since they have 18 more months to have thought about it, what is the measure you have to tell them whether or not this program is successful? And they don't have a measure. They're going to come back and tell us, we did just fine taking the electric money that usually goes to all the electric ratepayers, and we used it to replace fossil fuels, and we saved a lot of money. And we'd like to continue to be able to do that. That's what they're going to tell us, and we know it. What's my objection to it is that they're giving them more money to do something, the result of which is a foregone conclusion. And we are violating the commitment we made to ratepayers, because every one of those companies that contributes to the energy efficiency fund has seen its electric rates go down for the last 20 years. And they want a better deal than they have now. And the rest of the ratepayers can fend for themselves. So that's my objection. It's probably more in principle, and it's based also in the fact that we are unwilling and unable to come up with, to tackle fossil fuels directly, and we're doing it with kind of a backdoor, taken from a fund that was created for one purpose, to siphon the money off to give to a group who to subsidize their business operation.
And you didn't make this argument on the floor.
The committee vote, Senator Brock made a mistake in the committee vote, sent me a note, apologized. And I can make it on the floor, but the committee's already decided to do this. And we're the Energy Committee, and I would be irresponsible if I didn't talk to the Energy Committee, saying that this is a political shortcut to make some people happy who are whiners and complainers. That pejorative. Let me go back to the ski area people who a dozen years ago it was the year that we replaced all the nozzles and the snowmaking equipment, and we put millions of dollars into it, and we cut their expenses to make snow either by 60% or 40%, I forget which. But we all of us ratepayers funded that. And the next year after they had gotten that, they came in and they themselves wanted to be relieved from the energy efficiency charge, because now they were efficient and didn't think they ought to be paying the energy efficiency charge any longer. Every single year that all of us pay an energy efficiency charge, our electric bills reflect a savings. And that includes a savings on the price of electricity that has the efficiency charge in it. It's a winner. So you have saved me from having to stand up and say this amongst 30 people who wouldn't understand it, probably, as the way
As
this
opposed
committee
to
would.
us who understand it inside and out.
Yeah,
right?
who wouldn't understand it, and I appear to be undermining my committee. I have a serious disagreement with the committee.
Yeah.
So
Let me just interject here. I was away from the Senate for 4 years. When I came back, I was confronted with the old tradition that you never oppose your committee on the floor. That tradition showed up out of nowhere during the 4 years I was away. If you voted no in committee, you stood on the floor and explained why. Somehow that changed, and now it has the weight of tradition or something.
when you don't like criticism, you call people who oppose whatever it is. I believe traitors and scum was the word used in the last 48 hours. We were going to root out the traitors and scum who disagree with the official position. So I wouldn't use those words amongst us as referring to any of us.
Add to the story, and that is,
A few minutes on the other bill.
yes, so S-237, this committee voted out a 3-year, $6 million pilot. It takes energy efficiency charge dollars and puts them into thermal and transportation projects.
Yeah.
We considered that a way, it's the exact same thing in that you're taking, and that was because we had no money and we couldn't raise the money. So we moved money over to, I call it site.
We have the power to get money. When we proposed the energy efficiency charge, we were told it was wrong, there was no money, it was going to drive people to bankruptcy, it was taking money out of the electric system. That's what we were told. And we did it anyway. And the critics have admitted that, boy, We should have been doing that, and we continue to increase the energy efficiency charge because we went from the highest electric rates in New England to the next to the lowest, and that was the #1 reason for doing it. Now, there's money out there to deal with fossil fuels, but we won't do it. It's not because there's no money, it's because we, the Energy Committee and Senate and the House, won't do it.
Right. So de facto, there's no money. If we won't do it, there's no money. So therefore, we ran a pilot for 3 years. It turned out to be the foundation of figuring out how to do weatherization better. It's helped figure out how to do transportation better because it was seed money. So in this case, to me, this seemed like a worthwhile pilot to have energy transformation projects funded on a time limit basis through energy efficiency charge dollars. And it didn't seem it seemed consistent with what this own committee had done. So I know, park it there and just say on the other one, S-161, it adjusts 3 dates on the Rygate project. Rygate normally would have had its license, its current rate would have ended in 2022. A year ago, we pushed it to 2024, and we told the current owners to go out and figure out a way to use the waste heat. And they have not come back yet with a fully developed proposal. They asked for an extra year. Basically, we said, okay, take another year to go figure out how to make that plant more financially viable, because the degree to which they might take waste heat and create a new income stream could be reflected in reducing the rates that we pay for the electricity itself. It's a highly speculative thing. And we're just giving them a year to come back with another proposal. This lets them operate the plant because, of course, everything's calendared in. They have to have a rate that extends for the extra year. They have to have, the law has to change because they were set up only to operate in 2024. So those are, it's an extension of the status quo for the initial year.
I apologize for my last tirade because the point you made, I was making it, we were passing the night. We did some practice on the electric efficiencies pilot. That's why we went with it.
So
Well, that's the beginning of a discussion. I don't feel ready to vote. Might be when we complete the discussion.
Rygate is the best way out without kind of burning any bridges and without building any expensive new bridges.
are you satisfied? Are you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's hold these two things.
Well, I've been on the Senate
Right.
Finance for 4 years, so I don't, it's really, it's more of a conversation, I think, between the two of you, honestly, and it's not, I don't feel like it's a voting thing personally, but I want my committee members to have their time, if you will.
Okay.
I respect that. I understand that. But
my preference at the moment is to move ahead on those, but I understand Senator Crowley's concern. Senator Westman, would you like to have additional time to testimony?
I think I'm fine. And I will support the finance committee. I have to ask this question, the final analysis, not with Rygate, but in the other two. The attempt here is to reduce carbon.
Is what?
To reduce carbon overall.
Yeah, I think part of what has shifted is carbon reduction and savings. This is really an economic development tool for all these
Other than
businesses.
take the savings out of it, the attempt here is to reduce carbon. In the long run.
Yes, whether it's in the form of fossil fuels coming through electricity.